Hey nerds, I'm out for a walk again. Today for two reasons. One, being fitness. Sorry, slightly out of breath because I just finished running a little bit. My lungs still haven't finished healing from the illness a few weeks back. Number two, because I had a really rough night at work. Preceded by a really rough weekend at work. Preceded by a really rough couple of days at work. Those twofold things bring me to my topic for today, and it's not my crazy shaggy hair that really needs a haircut. It's the way that mental illness is taken care of in this country. As some of you may know, I work at a psychiatric. Getting back into shape is tough. Getting back into shape and doing a video at the same time, also tough. As some of you may know, I work as a mental health worker at a psychiatric and addiction facility. It's a mental hospital, but for anyone who's curious, and I can do a video on this later, mental hospitals are very different from how they're portrayed in like 98% of movies. A brief description of my job. As a mental health worker, I supply direct support care for patients struggling with mental illnesses of varying kinds and varying forms of addiction. Every job has its own challenges and low points and things that we don't like about them that we wish they would change, but they're not going to for various reasons. Very red in the face today. I did just cover over 2 miles. And my friends have heard many stories over the several years that I've had jobs like this. I'm willing to bet that most of them would think that the worst part about my job would be constantly being threatened, having stuff thrown at me, having bodily fluids thrown at me, being insulted, accosted, assaulted. But that's not actually the worst part about my job. The worst part about my job is when I have a patient who is just so far gone that there's nothing I can do to help them. So case in point, reason why my weekend was not so much fun at the workplace. I have a patient who is in what's known as locked door seclusion. You've probably seen that idea in movies. The difference between what you see in movies and what we do now, we don't do solitary anymore. That is only used very sparingly and in very small periods of time. They do it in prison, but we're not talking about prison today. So in locked door seclusion, patients are kept separate from the rest of the population on the unit called the milieu. They always have a staff member with them. Locked door seclusion is only used when we have no other way to help the patient control themselves and they are considered a danger to themselves or others. It's not to keep patients who annoy you away from people, it's for when they have difficulties interacting with other people and it makes them dangerous. So, I have this patient in the ALSA, which is locked door seclusion. It stands for Adult Low Stimulus Area, for lack of a better term, and I would like to point out this is actually a medical term, is psychotic. She believes she is the owner of our hospital, that God speaks to her, that she can fire and have any of the employees executed. So I suppose that technically her delusions aren't important for the story, but just so you understand, she's very psychotic, very manic. She does not stop talking, and she doesn't sleep. She pretty much talks and says the same things to staff members 24/7. And it makes her very difficult to redirect and refocus and help be therapeutic towards. She refuses to take her meds. One of the difficult things with psychotic patients is often their hallucinations, whether it be auditory, so in her case, God talking to her, often tell them that the medication is poison, or that something about the medication will kill them or disable them in some way, break their connection with God or whatever it is. And it makes it very difficult to treat, because after a certain point, therapy isn't helpful. You actually need medication to rebalance what's going on in order for therapy to actually be helpful. The worst part about my job is when a patient gets that far gone that I can't do anything to help them. It's actually worse than that, is when they think I'm trying to hurt them. And it breaks my heart. A little bit every time. And what was really difficult about Sunday, that I had 3 patients in this condition, and they all thought that the staff was trying to hurt them, and there wasn't anything we could do to help them. All we could do was keep them safe and try and keep them from hurting themselves. Which brings me to the real issue I want to bring up today. We've been covering psych in our final semester at nursing school. Our instructor actually used to work at the hospital that I do. I have studied psych a lot throughout my life, partially because of my own background, partially because I have a very strong interest in it. So the discussions that I have with her in class are very lively, and one of the things that we both agree on is that psych is something we don't talk about in our society. It's taboo, it's blamed, it's scary, it's not funded, and oftentimes it gets blamed, but then something else gets blamed and gets the funding. I don't want to come across as though I'm belittling or insulting. I just don't want to come across in a bad way. The recent shootings over the last couple of years, in which many of the perpetrators of the shootings have been found to have some sort of mental illness, instead of having an open discussion about mental illness and the way that our culture, our society, our country deals with it, which, mind you, is much, much better than what it used to, even as recent as 100 years ago, as recent as 50 years ago, or in some cases more recently than that. So we discussed the recent shootings that have happened over the last few years, and instead of having a discussion about mental illness, the way that we treat mental illness, the country has had this long debate about firearms and guns and people's rights to bear arms and whatnot. And I'm not here to debate that. That's not the point. I think that we need to be taking better care of these people. There needs to be more funding, more programs, more ways to catch these people early on, more research. This is what we call in nursing a vulnerable population. It's a group of people that don't exist in the reality that we do, but they don't. They experience the world in a very different way than what normal people do, what mentally healthy people do. And it's difficult. We're not a very old society. In the grand scheme of things, 8,000 years or so of socialization, written language and history, and only maybe 60 years of computers, a little bit more. There's a lot more research we could be doing, and there's a lot more good we could be doing. And honestly, I don't know what more is. I love my job. I feel like I get paid a decent wage for it. Obviously, I'm going to nursing school because there's more that I want to do, and I want to make more money, but I do think there's more we could do to help these people. And I don't know what that is, but maybe someone will hear this and come up with an idea. One of the tricky things is how many different kinds of mental illness there are. Sometimes I leave work very drained. It's very difficult when you're restricted into what you can do by funding and budgeting and things like that. I know that there's not enough money to go around. I know that we can't save everybody, and that we can't help everybody, and that some people are going to slip through the cracks. So I'm sorry about the long-windedness and the rambling, and I certainly hope this makes sense in some way, and I plan on revisiting this subject in the future. I suppose in the time being, in the comments below, feel free to leave your opinion on this, or recommendations, thoughts, feelings, your own story around mental illness. And by the way, mental illness is a clinical term. No one should ever feel ashamed to be diagnosed with a mental illness or suspect they have a mental illness. I don't know. This is my rambling soapbox. Thanks, nerds, for joining me on my walk. By the way, if you're keeping track at home, by this point you have covered 4.68 miles. So congratulations. You got your walk in for the day. And remember, neuroses eradicate... Ooh. I forgot how to spell nerds. Hold on a sec. Neuroses eradicate receptors dangerously synapses. Yeah. Bye.